I am super excited to be here. I have a really, really cool guest. We're going to talk about some great things. But before we do that, I want to tell you about NAMI Tennessee's email list. See, if you go to namitn.org, you can sign up. And you're thinking, why do I need to sign up for yet another email list? Here's why. Because you would know about all the cool things that NAMI Tennessee is doing. Things like our gala, our walk, things like NAMI at Home Lives. But more importantly, you'll get all the legislative advocacy alerts. And those are super important because you can email our legislators, you can be involved, and you can help shape mental health advocacy in the state of Tennessee. And listen, it's free. Who doesn't want to hear from NAMI? Absolutely free. We promise not to annoy you. We send them about once a week. So just head over to namitn.org. I'm sorry, namitn.org and sign up now. All right, that's enough of the housekeeping. We have a super cool guest today, Heather. Tell the folks who you are.
Oh my goodness. Who am I? So just going in with the existentialism right at the beginning. I'm Heather. I'm a Nashville native and local, and I am at Belmont getting my doctorate in mental health to help other people on their journeys. I find it a calling of sorts to kind of help people get back to where they were or forward into who they can be. So that's my jam.
I love the way you said that. That's my jam. Now, you're the author of Grief Doesn't Do Math, and I want to stay. But before I ask the question, I want to say I hate math. So I just
Me
think
too.
math is super awful. So I want to tell a little joke. When I first saw Grief Doesn't Do Math, I was like, I think this might be the only thing about grief that I agree with, because math is terrible. But sincerely,
Right.
the title is obviously arresting. It's obviously about grief. What is your book, Grief Doesn't Do Math, and how'd you arrive at the title?
Well, this is a copy. I'm like, um, I arrived at the title because at that point I was at Vanderbilt Divinity School and we were approached with compiling a thesis. And my son and I were going through grief at that time period, like it just coalesced. And I felt like, based on like the classes I had and the professors I'd talked to, there wasn't really a memoir that spoke to the immediacy of grief and how we all don't work through 5 stages. I mean, so to me, the mathematical equation was, work this stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now when you get to 5, you're done. You're woo, have a great life. And for me, that did not compute. As a hospital chaplain, as a hospice chaplain, as someone who worked in 5 hospitals, I did not see anyone computing through the grief stages. I saw them teetering back and forth. I saw them in all 4 or 5 or 3 in one instance. It just didn't ring true for the things I saw. And like we say in psychology, I'm only speaking from my experience, obviously. But I just saw this more and more, and I thought, what if we are just all being programmed to work a system that doesn't really work? Possibly. So that is what Grief Doesn't Do Math is about.
The thing that I always thought when I first heard about the 5 steps, you read the 5 steps, and I was, or the 5 stages. I guess we shouldn't call them steps; we should call them the 5 stages of grief. And I read about them, and I was like, wouldn't that be great? Like just step
How
one,
nice.
step two. Like there's just like right. It's like instructions, right? It's like, hey, how do I get to the new restaurant? Step one, back out of your driveway.
Hmm.
Step two, turn right on Main Street. Uh,
Yes.
we know that in mental health, in like serious and persistent mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, anxiety, we have a saying: recovery is not linear, right? You're going to have
Yes.
setbacks. Setbacks are likely. In substance abuse disorder, relapse is part of recovery. We understand that perfection is the goal, but nobody's going to be perfect on day one. It's going to happen, and being prepared for it. When we talk about grief, just for a moment, I know our bigger topic is overcoming the stigma surrounding mental health, but I want to stay on this for a moment because I think one of the biggest stigmas of mental health is this idea that recovery is this step process. Like you said, everybody's like, well, you got the 5 stages of grief. You're in number 3, you got 2 more, and then we're done. We don't want to hear from you anymore. Do you feel that this misunderstanding of how grief works and how recovery works, and that recovery is linear, is contributing to the stigma of mental illness and mental health issues?
Totally.
That was easy. You're just like, yes, yes, like, Gabe nailed
it. Before you even asked, I'm like, here we go. This is a whole rabbit hole, right? But it's not a rabbit hole. It's true. It's an earthquake, actually. Yes, we expect people to, hey, how about we just, can you go here for 30 days? And then when you get back, can you be a different person for me, please? Yeah, I'm laughing because I've experienced this in my own life. That's not sustainable, to say it nicely. It's just not going to work.
It not only does it not work, but it creates this. You've got, so let's compartmentalize this a little bit. We'll just call it, you've got the issue, right? And whatever the issue is, whether it's substance abuse disorder, mental illness, grief, whatever, you've got the issue, and we can all understand that the issue is problematic. That's why it's called an issue, right? And then on top of that, you've got 2 competing forces. You've got societal stigma, because they're like, well, I don't understand. Why didn't you work the steps, follow the stages, do the thing? Why didn't you, like you said, go away for 30 days and come back a completely different person? So now you've got the issue, and then you've got societal stigma or misunderstanding or discrimination, whatever word you want to use here. But then there's a third wheel, and that is, you believe it. Right? We live in this greater society. So now we have the issue. Our friends and family are annoyed with us. And then somewhere we're stigmatizing ourselves because we're like, well, why didn't it work for me? And I believe that's where we get some of the phrases where, like, I have treatment-resistant depression. Now, treatment-resistant depression is an absolutely real thing, but we know from the data that the vast majority of people that believe that they have treatment-resistant, depression, treatment-resistant schizophrenia, treatment-resistant issues, or they have, higher issue, it's actually this combination of a difficult case to treat and a misunderstanding of how the treatment works. But that stigma makes them believe, okay, I can't get better. And that's where my question is. What happens when people arrive at this point, okay, I can't get better, because of the stigma surrounding their mental health issues?
Oh my goodness. This one hits home.
I know, I like to ask the big questions.
I like it. I'll start with this. I was literally in a psychiatric facility when Naomi Judd passed away. And I was sitting in the big room. I was in there for a depressive disorder because I did not take my 50 milligrams of sertraline like I should have. And I overheard someone say next to me, she had everything. How could someone do that when they had everything? And I kind of sat aback, and I'm like, no, she didn't have everything, because she had about 6 or 7 things going on in her brain in her body. Like, I just think we are not paying enough attention to bodily health. And that is from brain to toes. That's what I call it. It's like, if someone has cancer, or diabetes, or if something's wrong with their pancreas, like, we pay attention. They will say, I have a disorder in my bloodstream, or my disorder in my whatever. I mean, literally, you can name any part of your body. But when it's the brain, it's like, oh God, now it's just, you've just blown up the earth. Like, why? It's an organ, right? It's just another organ in the body. That's how I see it. So let's treat the organ.
When people believe this, and I'm always fascinated by this idea, we have physical health and we have mental health, and I'm like, but those 2 things exist in me. Like, it's not like I can just turn it off. It's like, Gabe, you have a physical health disorder. That's no problem. I will just pause mental health and not worry about it, and vice versa. So I'm not. It's fascinating that society does separate. That's just a mental health problem. Oh well, then. I mean, could you imagine? He's sick. Well, yeah, but he just broke his leg in 7 places. Oh, that's just a lower body problem.
Yeah, and
Right,
you'll be on every prayer list in America.
Yeah, and but we're concerned. But the bigger concern is, how do we get to wellness, and how do we
Yeah.
stop people from? I'll give a little pushback. Let's talk about that for a moment,
Yeah.
since you brought it up. So we talk about the prayer list, and I know from again my personal stories. People were super willing to pray for me when I had surgery. People were super willing to pray for me when I had any physical issue. But when we started talking about bipolar disorder, they're like, well, I don't want to put the idea out there that nobody was willing to pray for me. There was just a lot more advice. It was like, oh, well, we'll pray for him, but you need, they would tell my mother, it's like, well, we'll pray for him, but you really should have clamped down on that when he was a kid. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
where's that asterisk coming from? Like what happened there? How do we get around it? Because we want to talk about overcoming the stigma of mental health. How do we get around that? Because I found out years later that my mom's like, look, I didn't get a lot of support. I told everybody you were in the psychiatric hospital, and they're just like, oh, he's in the loony bin, huh? And that hurt my mom. I found out about this years later, but we can all imagine having your child being hospitalized, and somebody's like, oh, and they say something flippant that's very painful. How do we overcome that, both for ourselves and to educate others? Because obviously my mom couldn't just start screaming at people, although I bet she wanted to.
So it wasn't in black and white that you were at a psychiatric hospital, like in the bulletin?
No, it wasn't at all. It was just
sarcastic.
like, pray for Gabe, undisclosed.
Yeah,
I know you are, and that's what
I literally know.
yeah, that's the bummer.
It is the bummer. Here's what I believe, and I've studied this extensively, personally and in school. So I'm going to look at this as an act of gratitude, because in our society now, people are talking about mental health. I lay awake at night. I'm like, this is a transformation. I believe it is here. And, back in my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, remember the Kennedys? They just sent that sister off and they lobotomized people. I mean, it was just tragic what they did to people. And we have progressed. I think I just want to make the point is progress has happened and has come. And look at, the Olympic athletes. Tom Brady last week, whether you like the Patriots or not, he's speaking about mental health. I mean, it's in the forefront now. So I am going to place I'm just in a state of like, I see the progression, over not even 50 years, 10 years. I don't think 10 years ago Olympians would say, I gotta bail because I've got to deal with my mind. I mean, that's cool. Simone Biles did that. So just that it's in the awareness now, it's like in the discourse. It makes me like, I have chills just thinking about it, based on when I was born.
It's very true. So the Simone Biles thing is it's a double-edged sword for me, right? Because it is cool, right? She is like, look, I am not mentally healthy enough to handle this, and this is dangerous, right? We always kind of forget that, because the elite athletes, the Olympians, they make it look so easy. But the reality is when all of us stand up, like body parts creak. And we watch Simone Biles like quadruple flip, contort her body all the way around on something that's about 4 to 6 inches wide, and land perfectly like it was no problem. We're just like, oh my God, she's blowing her shot. So that's sort of the crux of my question there. There's the double-edged sword. On one hand, I was like, that's beautiful, right? It is beautiful that she realizes that she is not mentally healthy. This is dangerous. She doesn't want to be paralyzed. She doesn't want to hurt herself on national television. She's putting herself first, and she understands what's going on in her brain. That's the positive part of the sword. Now there's a negative. That poor woman was cut down. She was everybody. You're squandering your chance. You're not representing your country. How could you? You're not a patriot. We hate. I mean, the abuse that the larger society heaped on this woman for having a mental health condition was stunning. And I thought to myself, if
Yep.
that woman would have broken her leg and said, I can't compete, I have a broken leg, the outpouring of support would have been love. Oh my
Oh,
God, you poor
yeah.
thing. How do we as a society grapple with that?
You're right. To your point, there would have been piles of roses outside of her hospital door if she'd broken her leg. So you're right about that. How do we as a society grapple with that? Well, I can only tell you what has worked for me, because that's all I have to go on is, my experience and my journey and my life. And I was telling my class this last night, I have found, okay, first of all, we cannot change anybody else. Okay, number one. And as you know, Gabe, we didn't discuss this, so this is off the cuff. We cannot control others. We cannot do one freaking thing about what anybody else thinks. So all we can do is what is in our bodily experience, okay? And I find that practices like mindfulness and meditation they have completely changed my life. And I don't mean sitting down for 30 minutes on a pillow and staring at the wall, because I can't do that. My mind is like, I got to go to the store, I got to go to work. I can't do that. But I find mindfulness in my daily practices, like waking up, walking to the shower. It's a mindful, it's based in Buddhism, and it makes you stay in the present moment. So what I'm saying is, find things that work for you. You can't change. We're not going to change society today with this interview, but we can change ourselves. I mean, 100%. And if we change ourselves, maybe that affects others, and if not, then we have given harmony to the world.
One of the things that I think of when you say change yourself, and when I hear it and when I think of it internally, just to kind of suss this out a little more, is you're right. We can't change other people, but maybe we can influence them. And when I think about the ways to influence them, when I first heard my mom say that, people said, "Oh, your son's in the loony bin. You should have been tougher on him." Well, he's always been this way. We're not surprised. I mean, just the kind of the not quite flippant, but flippant enough. Like you said, it wasn't in black and white in the church bulletin. It was vague. And these things hurt my mother. And my first impulse was, did you tell him off, Mom? Did you start screaming at him? Now, my mom doesn't have a mean bone in her body, so I know darn well she did not do that. But there was this piece of me that wanted her to just start screaming at people.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that my mother knew and knows that I did not at the time. It doesn't work. She could have yelled at people, and maybe it would have made her feel better in the moment, but it wouldn't have changed their mind. It wouldn't have influenced, and it would have driven them away. What she did instead was react. She was sad. She was upset. She walked away, and that made people think, well, what did I say? What did I do? And slowly I've been in, this was almost 20 years ago that this happened initially, and I've been in recovery for 15. A lot of time has passed, and a lot of those people have come around, and they're like, huh. I was kind of rude. I didn't know what to say. You really should have yelled at me. And she starts hearing stuff like that. And we're seeing lots of change around my mother, where people will come up to her and say, your son lives with bipolar disorder, right? We have a question because one of our teenagers, son's friend, etc. And now my mother has become this community resource. If she would have, this is my point, I promise.
No, I love this.
Yeah, I love it too. But I think to myself, if she would have done the Gabe way of just screaming at these people 20 years ago, we never would have gotten here. And all of these, my mother
Mm,
wouldn't be a resource. She wouldn't be passing my name around to everybody. She wouldn't be asking me questions to answer to other people. People wouldn't come and give her a hug. Nobody would have learned better language, coping skills, discussion points, because she would have been the mean
yeah.
lady that yelled at them.
Right.
But it also feels good to yell. Like we're shocked, right? My mother was scared and somebody said a mean thing. So that's my question to you, Heather. I promise. I
Hmm.
know it's long-winded, but I think to
I love
myself,
it.
my mother's reaction of yelling would have been justified. I don't think there's anybody within the
Totally.
sound of my voice that would have thought, well, yeah, your mom wasn't wrong. That was rude. But I see the outcome of my mother handling it better. And I know that's the way. That's how I behave now.
Mm,
And that's what I teach everybody. So there's my question for you, Heather. How do
mm,
we push down that impulse to
mm.
to be angry, because it's a justifiable anger, but it's not good for the overall betterment of the mental health advocacy world, for ourselves and for the people that we're trying to help. So how do we overcome that?
Mm.
I know it's a big one. I like to ask big questions.
I love it. So for me, CBT therapy and DBT, um, handling my emotions. I talk to a therapist once a week. She's incredible. She's like, I mean, I really think therapy is the way. I honestly, and she's like, let's name this emotion. Let's talk about it. How can you change the feeling surrounding it so we can have a better outcome? I'm a total believer in CBT and DBT therapy. The great thing about these therapies is that you can go on Facebook. You can find, I mean, these are accessible. That's what I'm saying. They're accessible. You don't even have to leave your room or your home. You can find these things. So that's where I've personally found it, is knowing that my emotional response might not meet the moment. It might be a little bit up, or it's not going to be helpful. And believe me, I've been on this journey through the pandemic. I
Haven't we
have,
all?
oh my God, like I've had horrible emotional responses, but I decided to not fix it, but I decided to change that because I didn't like it. I didn't like being so instant or off the cuff in my responses. I wanted intentional responses, and you know what you can do. I do this. I walk away. If someone says something and I feel like you were saying about your mom, I take a minute. I breathe, and then I'll say I need to use the restroom, and I will walk off and take 5 or 10 minutes and just ground myself. And grounding is a whole other thing that I totally believe in, that's helped me. And it's these coping mechanisms that I truly believe in, because it's changed my life and changed me, and I know it can help others.
You talk about coping mechanisms, and so often when we talk about coping mechanisms, people think that they're for the people who have mental health issues. They're like, oh, you have a substance use disorder, you
Yeah.
need coping mechanisms, you need way to deal with that problem. You're like, okay, you live with bipolar disorder, you need coping mechanisms, you need
Okay.
experience, and you need how to deal with it. But then the people around us, when we're like, look, you need a coping mechanism, like, no, we don't, we're not sick. And you're like, aha. Can you talk on that for a moment? Because I know that the message to people
Mhm.
living, like, the Gabe and the Heathers of the world, we get
Yeah.
we get lots of we are told that we need coping mechanisms, routines. I mean, we get so much therapy, and it's good. I'm not, but the people around us, they're just like, no, 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 we're good, we're fine. They don't feel like they need to learn coping mechanisms or that they need therapy. Can you speak on that for a moment? Because I know that a
Mm.
lot of people, like my family, who is like, look, we need some education here. I look at how they behaved after the education versus how they behaved before the education, and I'm so glad that they took the opportunity,
Mm.
because their accidental stigma was high. And after they took the educational classes, got the therapy, learned the coping skills, their accidental stigma was low. Can you talk on that for a moment for our viewers who are like, well, the
Sure.
coping mechanism is something that Gabe and Heather need, not something I need.
Right. Well, we all have mental health. We all exist in a 24-hour period. Like, if you're alive and watching this, this is not for people with mental health, like illness. It's for everyone. And we all have mental health issues. We all have brains. So if you suffer from anxiety or depression, that's considered a mental illness. And labeling is a whole nother topic we'll get into the next video. But I think if we all just accept that we are all on the same journey, we don't, I don't differentiate people. I don't look at people and say, oh, they're different from me because they have this or that. I think if we all just get some acceptance, Jesus, like this radical acceptance of this is how they are today, this is how I am today, and let's just bring each other together in this acceptance level. I just love that. Marsha Linehan started this with DBT therapy. She is my hero. She's in Seattle, a professor, and it's pretty radical, but it's, if you really trace it back, it's Jesus, Buddha. It's like, let's just love each other. Really, it all comes back to love. And how am I going to receive this person today? How am I going to receive them? Am I going to, attack them? Am I going to give them something of benefit? Am I going to be loving to them? I don't know. I just think a lot of it traces back, way back, thousands of years ago, and we have it at our disposal. We just have to remember.
I can certainly agree with that. Heather, we're almost out of time today, so we're at the section of the show that I like to call final thoughts. It is basically an opportunity for my guests to ask themselves any question they want and answer any question that they want. On the topic of overcoming the stigma of mental health, is what would you like to leave our audience with? You can talk for as long as you want.
Oh no. Oh no, or oh yes. As long as I want. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm a child of the, let's say, 80s. We did not have mental health practitioners. I guess you may know this. We had a general physician, and they would see you, I think, once a year. And no one talked about mental health. So I'm thankful for the kids now who have attention to their brains. But I just believe that despite the stigmas, which we're going to get rid of those, okay? Like, we're already on the way. It's in the vernacular now, right? Even in the US, it's in the vernacular, the discourse, that mental health is health. It's, like I said, your brain is part of your body, so your body is your health, and your brain is your. I mean, to me, it's just a simple equation. So I'm excited about what the future holds for the mental health unfolding. I do believe, with the attention to mental health, that maybe when my son is 30, they won't even call it mental health. They'll call it health. That's my goal, honestly. He's 13, and I think we're on a path. I think we're on a great path. You're not alone. You can text pound 988 and talk to anybody across the world. That's huge. So I just feel like it's time to maybe live into some gratitude for how far we've come. And yeah, you're not alone.
I
You're
love
never
that,
alone.
Heather. Heather, thank you so very much for being here. I'm going to pop you up real big on the screen so that you can
Oh
hold your
no.
book up and everybody can
Oh,
see. Give me 1 second. Just hold it right there. Like move it a little forward so we can see it. Forward, forward, forward. A little more. There we go. I like the grass on it. That's really, really awesome. Grief Doesn't Do Math by Heather Burwell. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being
thank
here.
you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you everybody for listening in. Look, at the beginning of the
Yes.
show, I told you you need to join our mailing list. I mean, why haven't you already? I mean, just for the last half an hour, you should have been listening to Gabe and Heather and joining the mailing list. But if you missed out, head over to namitn.org so you don't miss anything, including legislative advocacy alerts that will help shape what happens in the state of Tennessee as it pertains to mental health and substance abuse disorder. On behalf of NAMI Tennessee at Home Live, thanks everybody. Big, big waves, Heather. Bye.
Thank you.